Hello and welcome to Idiots Monday Morning, where we react to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Hey, everybody. Good Monday morning. Great to start the week with you. Our website is usefulidiots.podcast.com. You can go there to support the show and get bonus content. And this is a special Monday morning because we cover the Sunday morning news shows. But after they all wrapped on Sunday, we got another Trump assassination attempt. Someone at his golf course, armed, got relatively close to him and was apprehended and now detained. But this is the second Trump assassination attempt in 3 months. That's a lot of assassination attempts for a former president. So
it's going to be like 4 times a year moving forward.
Yeah,
quarterly. It's the second of your ongoing quarterly assassination attempts, perhaps.
And this comes as Trump and J.D. Vance are under fire for basically inciting hatred against undocumented immigrants, especially Haitians living in Ohio, who they falsely accused of kidnapping and eating pets. Right. So a lot to get to today.
Yeah, so much to get to. And I want to just announce that something that the media is continuing to ignore, by the way, is the killing of Eichner, the American citizen killed in the West Bank. So just keeping track of that, no mention of that. And also, Aaron, I don't know if you saw this, but another person self-immolated tragically over what's happening in Gaza in the tradition of what Aaron Bushnell did. And what's fascinating is the headlines about this. You may not actually know why he did this. Because, for instance, one headline, and this is indicative of how it was covered, says, "Man sets himself on fire outside Four Seasons Hotel in Boston," witnesses said. And, of course, they leave out of that the fact that it's across the street from the Israeli consulate. So.
Well, it's very typical.
Those are your news stories that you won't see.
Yeah. Very similar to how they covered Aaron Bushnell.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy how little attention these actions get. If somebody was setting themselves on fire for a different reason, like say to, I don't know, protest Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
As opposed to Israel and Gaza, I suspect we'd be hearing a lot more about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Nonstop coverage. Yeah. So anyway. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to this person who was responsible allegedly for the second assassination attempt. Let's see what we have.
So his name is Ryan Wesley Ruth. Kind of a tongue twister.
It is, yeah.
Ryan Wesley Ruth, and it turns out he is a fanatical supporter of the proxy war in Ukraine. Now we don't know if this was a motive in his attempted assassination of Trump. But we do know that Trump has been accused by Democrats of basically being against the proxy war, that if he's elected, then Putin's going to win. And I think it's quite plausible to suspect that this attempted shooter, Ryan Wesley Ruth, might have been motivated by that. Because certainly if you go by his public statements, he's a fanatic when it comes to continuing the proxy war in Ukraine. And he was so devoted to it that he actually went to Ukraine and he claimed to try to recruit foreign fighters. He even had a website for it. I don't know how successful he was at it. I don't know actually how actively involved he was, but he had a full website and he did write a lot about doing it. And so here he is in an interview from 2022 with Newsweek Romania, talking about his efforts to recruit people to fight in Ukraine.
Who you are and why are you here?
I'm 56 from the U.S. From North Carolina originally, so live in Hawaii now. So flew all the way from Hawaii here. So the question as far as why I'm here, to me, a lot of the other conflicts are gray, but this conflict is definitely black and white. This is about good versus evil. This is a storybook. Any movie we've ever watched, this is definitely evil against good. I mean, we're battling a situation here where, the Ukrainians and the rest of the world are caring and kind and generous and unselfish and take care of one another. And it's just a matter of we need to stand up for that. That is the most important thing in the world, is just to show human beings that we're kind and we're caring and that we take care of one another and that the world is united.
So that's Ryan Wesley Ruth speaking about how much he supports the war in Ukraine, and again, he traveled to Ukraine to recruit people, international fighters, for it. He had a whole website set up. It was basically called Fight for Ukraine. And the website's still up, actually. But, funnily enough, who he worked with, Katie? You might remember he's an old Useful Idiots fan favorite. He worked with Malcolm Nance.
Oh, the best.
I'm not sure if he's still with MSNBC, but one of the most unhinged Russiagators, basically.
Yeah.
Not only was Trump guilty of treason in his eyes for colluding with Vladimir Putin, but basically everybody who dared to question the narrative about Russiagate and about the Ukraine war was basically a Russian agent in Malcolm Nance's eyes. And Malcolm Nance infamously went over to Ukraine to also volunteer, and he claimed to be fighting on the front lines, when in reality he was in a safe house far away from any fighting, just tweeting. And they worked together.
Aaron, tweeting is warfare.
Well, according to people like Malcolm Nance, it certainly is, because
Yeah.
Russian bots are like invading the country.
Exactly right.
So,
it's the next Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. So Malcolm Nance was just bringing the fight, I guess, over to closer to Russia by tweeting from Ukraine as opposed to tweeting from here.
He also, by the way, claimed totally without any evidence, and it's incorrect, that Jill Stein had a show on RT, something that he said on MSNBC and never, of course, retracted.
Of course not. Yeah. Because why do we need to correct disinformation if it's in the service of the dumbest conspiracy theory of all time, which is that like Trump was a Russian agent and everybody else, like Jill Stein, was also part of somehow this massive Russian conspiracy. That was Russiagate. And so Ryan Ruth also, he's so devoted to the Ukraine proxy war. He even appeared in a propaganda video for the Azov Battalion, which is the neo-Nazi militia that was once barred from receiving U.S. military assistance. After Russia invaded, U.S. media quietly stopped referring to Azov as neo-Nazi. All that didn't matter anymore. And most recently, a few months ago, the Biden administration also quietly lifted a ban on arming Azov. So now they can receive U.S. weapons a lot more freely. Who cares about congressional law? And so anyway, this guy, Ryan Ruth, he went to a protest for Azov in 2022. And there's a shot of him in one of their videos. Let's see it. There it is. That's a rally for Azov. I think it might have even been held in the U.S. or maybe it was in Ukraine. I don't know. But there he is.
And that's not Gary Busey, by the way.
It's not Gary Busey, no. Now, Azov Battalion has put out a statement saying we have nothing to do with this guy. He's not a member. No connection at all. But, look, when this war began, or at least this phase of the war began, because really this war began back in 2014 with the U.S. backed coup. But when Russia invaded, you had a small number of people like Ivan Kachanovsky. He's a former guest of Useful Idiots, a Ukrainian Canadian professor, done a lot of work on the extremist movements inside Ukraine that U.S. was arming. He warned that this would have blowback, that like fanatics from who support like these far right ultra nationalists inside Ukraine, some of them are going to come back to the U.S. and there's going to be blowback. And the question is whether this attempted Trump assassination is an example of that. Certainly a lot of ties between Ryan Ruth and Ukraine. Let's look at how the media covered this. John Brennan, the former director of the CIA, he came on MSNBC, and this was the take that he gave.
I think it shows that, we are a country awash in guns, including a lot of these high-powered assault rifles that really allow individuals, mentally disturbed or otherwise, to be able to take matters into their own hands and engage in these awful acts of political violence. So, again, the law enforcement authorities, Secret Service and others have their work cut out for them.
Okay, so that's true, right? He's making the obvious point that it's a very violent country. Guns are very accessible, and that's very dangerous, especially when you have mentally unstable people. But what John Brennan did not discuss on MSNBC, and I doubt he'll be asked about it, is the connection to Ukraine. The fact that this American went over to Ukraine to recruit foreign fighters for a proxy war that John Brennan basically helped start, because he was the head of the CIA when the government was overthrown in Ukraine back in 2014 with U.S. support. And the main driver of that coup were ultranationalists, the very kinds of people that this shooter, Ryan Ruth, was recruiting to fight for, these militias in Ukraine that basically drove the coup and have been on the front lines of the war ever since. So the violent connection here is not just between, guns and like the availability of guns and this attempted assassination. There's also a connection here between the violent overthrow of foreign governments and the encouragement of a proxy war in Ukraine, which Ryan Ruth was very much immersed in. And so we wanted to cover that here because that's not an angle you're going to get on corporate media.
And just imagine if he had been pro-Russia. He was rooting for Russia in the side of the proxy war. I wonder if that would get any coverage in the media.
Yeah, that would be like around the clock.
Right.
If he was pro-Russian, but he's not. And you have to wonder, was this, again, obviously his mental health is a major factor here. That's usually the case with attempted shooters or mass shooters. So that's totally, but you have to wonder if at least partly, he was motivated by the perception that Trump was a threat to the Ukraine war. And I'm not saying Trump actually is a threat to the Ukraine war, because contrary to popular belief, when Trump was in office, he actually sent weapons to Ukraine that Obama wouldn't send, because Obama didn't want to further escalate a disaster that he started by overseeing the coup that John Brennan was also a part of. So I'm not saying that Trump is accurately perceived as a foe of the Ukraine war, but that's the perception. And you have to wonder if that was a motivation here.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, some other things about him. He did donate to Act Blue, which raises money for the Democrats. And I like the way he describes himself on his LinkedIn page. He says, work has never been about money, rather building frameworks for people to thrive and succeed. Being mechanically minded, I enjoy ideas and invention and creative projects with artistic flair. Not sure if this falls under that characterization. But I just wanted to tell people about how he describes himself on LinkedIn.
Well,
that's relevant.
This comes at a pretty awkward time for supporters of the proxy war in Ukraine, because what is their top priority right now? It's getting Joe Biden to sign off on long-range strikes with U.S. weapons into Russia. Now, Joe Biden 2 years ago said, we're not going to send Ukraine rocket systems that can strike into Russia. Of course, he walked that back and did just that. And now he's being asked to sign off on basically letting Ukraine use U.S. weapons to launch long-range attacks into Russia. And there was a meeting at the White House on Friday with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who's really pushing for this. Biden has not made a decision yet, or at least not one that we publicly know about. But the pressure is on, and here is Ukrainian President Zelensky making the case to CNN.
You have also been trying to persuade the United States and Europe to allow you to use the weaponry to strike into Russia. Explain why this is important. What do you want to hit in Russia that you think you should be allowed to hit?
Everybody is looking the decision of the United States. Everybody's waiting for such decisions. After that, they make decisions. It's true. And so we wanted very much to use this weapon and just to attack these jets on the military bases, not civilians infrastructure, military bases.
So you just want to be able to attack the bases that are being used to launch these weapons, these planes, these missiles.
Yeah, because these jets, from there, they use not only missiles. They use these jets, and jets used per month 4,000 guided aerial bombs just on the east of our territory. 4,000 bombs.
And these bombs and missiles are hitting Ukrainian civilians,
schools,
energies,
universities, all our energy infrastructure. They destroyed 80% by these guided bombs. 80%. Now I said, we had some meetings with officials, and I said, we waited too long. Now Russia began to move their jets from 100, 150 kilometers, 300 to 500. After that, I will tell you, and that now we need more permissions.
Do you have permission now to?
No, till now, no.
I mean, it's so sad the position he's put himself in, where he needs to beg for permission from Joe Biden to launch long-range strikes into Russia, which he actually acknowledges would be futile, because he says there at the end that Russia's moved most of its warplanes out of range anyway. So what exactly is he trying to hit if he acknowledges that the targets are not even within reach? And I do think, actually, contrary to what he says, he wants to hit Russian energy infrastructure and just civilian infrastructure in general. Russia does that in Ukraine, it's true, and Ukraine's done that in Russia as well, and they've also done that in the Donbass for a long time now. Again, as we covered last week on the show, Victoria Nuland recently admitted that there was a peace deal which the U.S. encouraged Zelensky not to sign, because she said that would have left Ukraine neutered militarily. Well, would you rather be neutered militarily in a neutral country, not at war, or would you rather be devastated, which is the state of Ukraine right now? And he's pushing for an escalation that I'm not even sure Joe Biden, for all his recklessness, will want to authorize, because I think there's a recognition that first of all, it wouldn't even make a difference anyway, that Russia is attacking Ukraine with glide bombs a lot, which these rocket systems that Zelensky wants to use can impact. And Ukraine is in a really dire situation. But basically, Zelensky also faces the pressure of the ultranationalists that the U.S. has sided with for more than 10 years. And they want no peace, no negotiations. They just want constant escalation. So that's what he's up against. And I think that's who he's really speaking for here.
Yeah, and we have more Zelensky. Here he is talking to Fareed Zakaria about Putin.
People have to understand that his mission is not to stop the war. He doesn't want to stop anything, because he doesn't need, and he afraid very much of successful Ukraine. It's not about even victory.
But then how will the war end? Because you're not going to get a total victory, it seems to me. You're not going to drive him out of all of the Donbass and Crimea. He's not going to be able to occupy Kyiv. So there will have to be some compromise.
It's when you're very strong. When you're very strong. And the other side knows that you're very strong. And you're as strong as possible to make influence on his society, not to be very happy with this war, because he afraid, again, I repeat it again and again, because I'm sure in it, he afraid only one thing: no leaders, no countries, no nothing. He afraid of his society, Russian people. And if Russian people are in danger, if they don't have comfortable life, if they live without energy like our people, they will understand the price of the war, and they will be not happy with it, and they will begin to influence on him, on Putin. That's why I said, make Ukraine strong, and you will see that he will sit and negotiate.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is he's saying, make them experience what we're experiencing, and then they'll oppose this war. Well, was that going to happen in Ukraine, given that they're experiencing this?
Yeah, and also, I mean, note how he just said, basically, the people of Russia have to suffer for this war to end, because then they'll put pressure on Putin. And he says they have to experience what we're experiencing in terms of energy too. So, but note in the previous answer, he said we don't want to strike energy.
Yes,
we just want to go after. But he's contradicting himself there.
Right.
What he's saying is we want to inflict suffering on the Russian people so that they'll pressure Putin. That's been the strategy of U.S. neocons for more than a decade now, right? That, like, we're going to put sanctions on Russia. We're going to arm Ukraine in the proxy war that began in 2014, rather than accept the Minsk Accords, which could have ended that war. And then the people of Russia will rise up against Putin. Victoria Nuland's been saying that for like a long time now. Okay. Right. Literally, like, that's how she justified ignoring the Minsk Accords back in like 2015. So it hasn't happened. Putin, according to polls that everybody trusts, or most people trust at least, is very popular inside Russia. His support has not really declined. In fact, some polls say that it's increased throughout the course of this war. So this idea that you're going to bomb Russia enough to get the people to like rise up against Putin. It's just not going to happen. The alternative is you could negotiate along the lines that were actually reached in Istanbul more than 2 years ago. Top Ukrainians have said that there was a very real compromise there. Russia is not going to offer as good terms as they did in Istanbul, but I think it's at least worth exploring what can be worked out, or else what happens? Like just more of the same. Ukraine loses more people. Winter is coming up. Their energy infrastructure is really devastated because of Russian attacks. Like, you know, the alternative is more war. And compare all this to what Zelensky was saying back when he was negotiating with Russia back in March of 2022. This is right before that deal was reached in Istanbul, which the U.S. blocked. And listen to what Zelensky said back then.
Я думаю, що у всіх різні інтереси. Причому у всіх.
Okay, we have to translate this.
It's there, but it's very small.
The subtitles are blocked. So let me actually.
No, I don't think it is for people. Are they? Is it for viewers?
Well, for us it is.
Oh, right. Okay.
And
yeah.
for our video audience, okay. Basically, what he says is there are those in the West who don't mind a long war because it would mean exhausting Russia, even if this means the demise of Ukraine and comes at the cost of Ukrainian lives. I'll say it one more time. This is Zelensky, March of 2022. There are those in the West who don't mind a long war because it would mean exhausting Russia, even if this means the demise of Ukraine and comes at the cost of Ukrainian lives. So Zelensky, back then when this war began,
so crazy,
recognized exactly what the U.S. was doing and trying to use his country to bleed Russia. And that's presumably why he let his top officials negotiate with Russia a deal to end the war.
Right.
But then a month later, Boris Johnson comes and tells him, we're not going to back you up. You should keep fighting. And he listened to him.
Can you imagine if the media asked him about that quote?
Yeah, that's a great. I'd love to see how he answers that. Maybe he'd say that I don't know, he was injected with Russian propaganda poison. Yeah,
right.
Who knows?
Havana syndrome brought to Ukraine. Yeah, that's just so crazy. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's turn to someone who would love to see the Biden administration give Ukraine permission to launch long-range strikes with U.S. weapons inside Russia, and that's Lindsey Graham.
Now, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Welcome back to the show, Senator.
Thank you.
All right, a lot to unpack there. So let's start with Ukraine. We know that our president met with the new UK Prime Minister Starmer at the White House to talk about this use of Western weapons further into Russia. New York Times says this: the president remains deeply fearful of setting off a dangerous, wider conflict. You heard Mike Tobin's reporting there. I mean, Putin out there saying that he considers it will mean NATO countries, the U.S. and European countries are fighting Russia. He says it'll create a threat he has to respond to. Is he bluffing?
All I can say is that this administration has been a disaster on the world stage. They've been slow to deliver.
Notice how he overtly, explicitly does not answer the question.
Deliver weapons. They've been slow to deliver the jets. They've been slow to allow Zelensky to put pressure on Russia to get them at the table. Air bases inside of Russia are being used to kill Ukrainian civilians. Most NATO allies would like Ukraine to be able to use the weapons more effectively. Yes, do not let Putin set policy. What's going on in Israel? We had Iran in a box. One of the first things that Biden did was let him get back in the oil business. We're at 300,000 barrels a day when Trump left in terms of Iranian oil, 1.3 million now a day by the Iranians. They took that money, gave it to Hamas, Hezbollah, and they're on the verge of a nuclear weapon. When it comes to the Biden-Harris administration, they're a complete disaster. I've never been more worried about a nuclear breakout by Iran than I am right now. I've never been more worried about another 9/11 again.
By the way, that's interesting, given that it's Trump who slashed the Iran deal, which precisely was limiting nuclear development.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to critique Biden, you could say, why didn't you go back to the Iran deal that your previous administration under Obama negotiated? Like, why did you side with Trump? But instead, Lindsey Graham's complaining that for some reason Biden stuck with Trump's policy. Like, that's what Biden did. He didn't go back to the Iran deal. And this idea that like we have the right to limit Iran's oil production, like Are we in charge of Iran's oil? Did the people of Iran vote for Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump and Joe Biden to like decide how much oil that they can produce and sell to people? It's, again, this all comes back to hegemony. Okay, more Lindsey.
America than I am right now. The withdrawal from Afghanistan put every jihadist on steroids. We have a broken border. There are more terrorists in our country.
Every jihadist on steroids. Like, first of all, invading Afghanistan to begin with meant that Al-Qaeda went from being in a small little patch of land between Afghanistan and Pakistan to basically everywhere. All over the Middle East, other places too. So that was that. And then also, by the way, Lindsey Graham was a fanatic supporter of not only the Iraq War, which spread ISIS, which gave rise to ISIS and spread it over into Syria, but then when the Syria Dirty War began, he also was a fanatic supporter of arming an insurgency that was dominated by Al-Qaeda. The same, I don't like to use the term jihadist because there's an Islamophobic connotation to it, the way it's used. But the same people that Lindsey Graham claims are now on steroids. Nobody is responsible for sectarian insurgents being on steroids more than people like Lindsey Graham in Washington, who, Syria was one of the most expensive dirty wars in CIA history, and he was a fanatic supporter of it.
And any time I can remember associated with terrorism. So on 9/11, we're just living on borrowed time here at home, and Israel may have to strike to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. If the Ayatollah, who's a religious Nazi, had a nuclear weapon, he would use it. It's just not.
When's you going to come in like, sir, I was asking you about missiles in Ukraine. Like now you're talking about the Ayatollah and bombing Iran. Like, can you curb your Iran obsession for like a moment? Just
curb
to
your
answer
enthusiasm. Yeah. Yeah.
Ukraine,
also, he's obsessed with putting Iran in a box. Do you remember this SNL skit from like 2000s? Bad Word in a Box.
Oh, of course, yes, with Andy Samberg and Justin Timberlake.
Yeah,
that's a classic.
That's a classic. That's what I keep thinking about every time he says this. Yeah,
it's Iran in a box.
Yeah, Iran in a box. Iran in a box.
The world is on fire, and Harris's fingerprints are all over this. She was the last person in the room in Afghanistan.
Okay, I want to ask you about several of those things, Iran and others, but first I want to make sure, one more question on Ukraine. When it comes to how this thing wraps up, President Trump was pressed the other night about how to win this, what he considers, and he kept saying he just wants to end it. Listen, you've been to Ukraine more than I have. I was talking to Ukrainians this week, though, who say it cannot involve ceding territory to Putin that he took from them. That's not how they see this ending for many reasons. Do you talk to the president about what his plan is if he's reelected to end this thing?
Yeah, he's right to want to end the war in a way not to start a new war. The last person I would listen to about how to end the war is the Biden administration or the Obama team. In 2014, we had an end of the war in Ukraine. It led to another invasion. Here's what Trump will do. He will end the war in a way not to entice China to invade Taiwan. He will end the war in Ukraine in a way to prevent a third invasion. Biden has no plan to end this war that is effective. I am listening to Zelensky. He has a plan that's coming out in about a week.
Oh, yes, the Zelensky plan. We just heard the Zelensky plan. It's basically make the Russian people suffer more.
Right.
That's his plan.
More weapons. Good luck with that. More weapons, please. Yeah.
But this illustrates that, Trump is kind of, he faces inside his own party two different camps. They're actually, in the same way that the Democrats actually have people who oppose the genocide in Gaza. Like there's a small number of them, but they're there. There are differing factions inside the Republicans when it comes to Ukraine too. And Lindsey Graham's in one camp. He's just a typical neocon. But there are people and JD Vance appears to represent them, who actually want to end the war pretty quickly and would be willing to support the kind of compromise and some sort of recognition of Russian concerns that I don't think Biden would. Now, that's what JD Vance says. Whether once they get to office and they face all the pressure from the Beltway and the national security state, whether they would actually come through. Trump's record is not very promising. He caved to them constantly when he was in office, but certainly there is a difference inside the Republicans, and Lindsey Graham will be leading the charge to basically continue the same policy.
I mean, it's such an indictment of the Democrats that Trump was being so much more logical about Ukraine during the debates than Kamala did. Was being like Kamala came off as the unhinged hawk, and Trump, and again, Aaron, as you say, he doesn't always, I mean, it's an understatement, deliver what he promises, but he was like saying some sensible stuff about stopping war. I wonder if Lindsey Graham was angry about that.
He was warning about, he was like, hey, like, don't we all remember that both of our countries have like nuclear weapons, and why aren't we talking about that? He said something to that effect, and it's true.
I wonder if Lindsey was crying at that point.
And it's crazy that Donald J. Trump is like somehow a voice of reason on anything,
Right.
but yet because on anything to do with Russia, things have become so unhinged. He is in that position sometimes, but again, that doesn't take away from the fact that his policies, contrary to what he says and what his critics say too, were actually hawkish toward Russia and actually did play a role in bringing us to where we are today, because he pulled out of really important arms control treaties that helped limit the weapon stockpiles of the U.S. and Russia, and that decision to do that also played into the tensions and the acrimony that led to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Right.
Because right before Russia invaded Ukraine, it put out a draft peace treaty that partly was trying to address all and restore the arms control safeguards that Trump had torn up. So, he has responsibility too.
Right.
Okay.
Also, just shout out to Lindsey Graham for the confidence with which he totally avoids answering the question.
Yeah.
Doesn't even pivot. Doesn't even start and pivot away. Just starts without answering. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's turn. This is where we usually start the show, but because of the breaking news with the Trump assassination attempt, we changed it up. But the big news of the last week was basically, well, two things on the Trump front. One, his very close friendship with Laura Loomer, unhinged person. I don't even know what she does, but she's like a fanatic supporter of Israel.
So she kind of branched out to like white nationalism.
Yeah. Made a racist joke about Kamala Harris this last week about how the White House would smell like curry if she's elected. Anyway. And she was traveling around with Trump, including accompanying him to the 9/11 memorial. And of course, the other major issue with Trump was him claiming during the debate that immigrants are eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. And so here is Meet the Press with the recap.
Sunday morning, we are now just 51 days away from Election Day. And after the first debate this past week, the race is still incredibly close. Former President Trump's allies want him to spend these critical final days talking about the issues on voters' minds, the economy, healthcare, immigration, and focusing on the vice president's vulnerabilities. Instead, Mr. Trump spent most of the week falsely claiming that migrants are eating pets in a small town in Ohio and defending his association with a far-right agitator who other Republicans have condemned. On Tuesday night, former President Trump and Vice President Harris faced off for what may have been the most important 90 minutes of the campaign.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. Clearly, he is having a very difficult time processing that.
I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
During the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
Now, former President Trump doubled down on baseless claims he made on the debate stage that members of the Haitian population in Springfield, Ohio, are abusing pets. City officials say there is just no evidence of that.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
They're taking the geese. You know where the geese are? In the park, in the lake. And even walking off with their pets. My dog's been taken.
This morning, Springfield.
Let's talk about pets, baby.
Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the geese and good. Another great musical idea. Yeah.
I love how he introduced the geese to this.
I know it's expanding.
Yeah. The animal kingdom of Trump's fantasy migrant kidnapping victims is expanding to geese.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe he thinks maybe some people have pet geese.
Maybe make America geese again.
Oh yeah, true.
Okay.
Well, that's what's interesting. There are a couple of interesting things about that, but I do really like Laura Loomer is kind of a hilarious. I mean, she's really scary, but she is a hilarious character, unintentionally hilarious character. But I also think it's hilarious that he just continues to claim that his rallies are the biggest rallies. He'll just never stop making that claim. Yeah,
she certainly really baited him there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, and I mean, he doesn't do debate prep.
right.
But the one thing they really tried to impress upon him before him was like, don't get triggered, Mr. President. She's going to try to bait you. They must have warned him that even she would bring up his crowd size. Like, I'm
Right.
sure he was prepared for that, but he couldn't resist. He couldn't resist because he's a pretty petty person.
Right.
And she really triggered him there. It was impressive. That was well done on her part.
Speaking of petty, you know what else he did that I couldn't believe? That was so triggered. He wrote on Truth Social, "I hate Taylor Swift," after Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's not going to win him the vote of the Swiftie crowd. But
Nope.
hey, you know what? I don't know.
You're gonna get Swift voted.
Yeah, but also, isn't like the majority of Taylor Swift's fan base like not of voting age anyway? So is that
Maybe.
is that even going to make a difference in the race?
I just think it's so funny. He literally wrote it on in all caps.
That's very funny.
I hate Taylor Swift. Yeah, Don. I mean, he's so bad at pretending to be at all chill.
Well, for people who
Pretty
think that Taylor Swift is like kind of like a mediocre, pop star, he'll find people who agree.
Oh, true.
With him
Yeah.
there, who think she's kind of overrated and don't like all the attention like that she gets. So maybe he'll find maybe amongst like hardened music critics, old school music critics, he'll find common cause who also
Right.
don't like the Taylor Swiftization of music.
I will say, "Anti-Hero" is her best song.
Okay.
I think it's much better than everything else. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I use Slate. This is why you tune in for our pop culture insights
and debates. Yeah.
There you go. So there you go. Anti-Hero by Taylor Swift, everybody. I'm sure like none of you have heard it, so check it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to JD Vance because he was a major spreader of the claim about migrants eating cats and dogs. And he was asked about it by Dana Bash.
Once and for all, you again started this in part by saying that, at which Donald Trump repeated on the debate stage, that, and he didn't say anything about the policies that you're talking about. He just said Haitians are eating dogs and cats. Can you affirmatively say now that that is a rumor that has no basis with evidence?
Dana, the evidence is the firsthand account of my constituents who are telling me that this happened. And by the way, I've been trying to talk about the problems in Springfield for months, and the American media ignored it. There was a congressional hearing just last week of angel moms who lost children because Kamala Harris let criminal migrants into this country who then murdered their children. The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
But it
if
wasn't
I have
just a
to
meme,
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast. You had one.
So he says, if I have to create stories,
Yeah.
so is he acknowledging that the story is created,
Yeah.
aka fake?
Right. And she actually asked him about this.
Okay.
Interview with her. You talk about pushing back against me, Dana. You didn't push back against the fact that she cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is why a lot of Americans can't afford food and housing.
You just said
We
that
ought
you're
to be
creating
talking
a
about
story.
public policy.
Sir, you just said that you're creating the story.
What's that, Dana?
Awkward.
Yeah. Good moment to pretend you couldn't hear. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a long pause on both their
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah.
So that was some awkward dead air.
Yeah. Also, I think that the media should, given that he's insisting that this is true, even though we know it isn't, I think that the media should start reporting that JD Vance had sex with a couch.
There we go. If you have to create stories,
Yeah.
to raise awareness about, I don't know, responsible furniture management, then
right.
Yeah, then people should accuse JD Vance of.
Because there's as much evidence for that claim. Remember that rumor that was making the rounds about how he had sex with a couch.
Yeah, well, JD Vance will claim that his constituents complained to him about it. Although I'm not even sure if that's true. I mean, basically, there was like one video on social media of a mentally ill woman who had harmed a cat, and that got spun into Haitian migrants are eating cats. And look, the whole thing is so unfortunate. Like, missing from this entire conversation, well, it's many things. But first of all, what has been the impact? Well, Haitians in Ohio have reported feeling scared and feeling to be the target of harassment and hate because of this. And that doesn't get as much attention. And then the whole background too, like, why do we have so many migrants here from countries? And in so many countries where the people are being demonized, like the people that flee are being demonized, the U.S. has played a role in destroying their country. So Haiti, for example, has been the target of at least two U.S.-backed coups in the last 34 years. And then if you also want to count the one where Hillary Clinton more recently basically chose the candidate, you can say 3. But, and that was, and previously the U.S. propped up a dictatorship that ruled the country for years and basically crushed any sense of democracy there. So there's that background, which just never gets discussed in all this.
Right. And I also do think that this is an example of where Trump's rhetoric has a real impact. So, I mean, I think that his critics often focus more on his rhetoric than on policy, and that's so that they don't have to provide policy alternatives. But this is an example of how discourse matters, because it can result in violence.
Totally.
And killing.
Totally.
Yeah. By the way, I'm sorry, but to interrupt, we have, I believe right now, let's see, how many likes do we have? I need to keep harassing you guys. Apologies. It hurts me more than it hurts you. But we need to get up our likes. We have 1K, which is good, but that's not even half of our viewers. So guys, if you haven't already, give it a like. It's a very easy way to spread the news, support the show, and get the word out. So, all right, that's up a little bit more. Let's try to get it to 1,500. I believe in us. Come on, guys, we can do it. We can do it. I'll settle for 1,300 just because I'm a nice person. Where are we at now? Let's see. We're at 1.2. Come on, smash that like, guys. Okay, we made it. All right, great. All right, next clip.
I think we have some more JD.
Oy vey.
Video, the origins of which CBS cannot confirm, claiming Africans are grilling cats in Dayton. Haiti's not Africa, Dayton's not Springfield. But putting all that aside, what is your intent in furthering the focus on these people? You're not talking about how to surge federal funds to help with safety, hospitals, and schools. You're talking about this.
Margaret, is your argument really that it's a huge difference if migrants are grilling cats 20 miles away from Springfield rather than downtown Springfield? And
that's, yeah, the point is that they're lying and the claims are inconsistent. It was Springfield, now Dayton. This is this line that he comes up with is just his attempt to. It's a pretty good talking point. It's just illogical. Yeah.
Would it change if the video was 20 miles closer to where these things allegedly occurred? My point here is that the American media ignores these stories. Everybody who has dealt with a large influx of migration knows that sometimes there are cultural practices that seem very far out there to a lot of Americans. Are we not allowed to talk about this in the United States of America, Margaret, because the American media is more interested in fact-checking innocent people who are begging for relief than they are in investigating some of these claims?
They're fact-checking you. Like,
right.
What is he talking about? Like, does he represent some, like, faceless crowd of like anonymous people who are like raising the alarm about like cat eating? Like, is there some massive like movement that we don't know about? It's JD Vance and Donald Trump that have been spreading these claims, so they're fact checking them, like, and now he claims he basically like represents innocent anonymous residents who are trying to sound the alarm. Like, it's him. He spread it.
Yeah, I love the way they just lean into confusing Africans with Haitians.
That's the other thing too. Yeah. Oh, God, so many things to be offended by.
I know.
And listen, the same thing applies the other way, right? Like you can say, I think, like constantly calling Trump a traitor to Russia and the next Hitler. I do think that is actually a form of incitement in some ways. That especially someone who's like mentally unstable is going to take that seriously and maybe do what they can to prevent this like treasonous Russian asset from coming to power. And that might have been a factor in this latest attempted assassination on Trump. But it goes both ways. If you're demonizing undocumented immigrants, that in the same, in a similar fashion, then that's going to promote violence and hate towards them too. So everybody should stop incitement. Like, and of course, these people, Trump and Vance, like they demonize not just like individuals, but like masses of people, entire categories of people, simply because they come from a different country.
Right.
I'm going to talk about what my constituents are sending me. That video was actually filmed by a constituent. That video was filmed by a person who is worried about what's going on in these communities. I'm going to talk about it because that's what I need to do as the United States Senator for Ohio, is represent Ohio and actually make sure that people's concerns get their voice.
Again, as a representative of Ohio, these are officials from Ohio, including the Dayton police chief, who said that there is no evidence of what you just claimed as being verifiable or true. CBS confirmed
I think that his constituents, this is just spitballing this idea. Some constituents should start a petition, concern JD Vance constituents against having sex with couches. Then he'll be forced to talk about his constituents' concern with his sexual habits with couches.
Alleged sexual habits with the couches. Yes.
Well, no, they should. I'm using the same standard as he does.
Yeah. He would not want to have his own argument applied to a different
sex life. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. He supports Trump and Vance, but he's not on board with the whole Haitian immigrants eating pets thing.
Yeah, because he's a coward.
And here's a question I never thought I would have to ask, but do you see any evidence as governor of the state that Haitian immigrants are eating pets?
No, absolutely not. That's what the mayor said. That's what the chief of police has said. I think it's unfortunate that this came up. Let me tell you what we do know, though. What we know is that the Haitians who are in Springfield are legal. They came to Springfield to work. Ohio is on the move, and Springfield has really made a great resurgence with a lot of companies coming in. These Haitians came in to work for these companies. What the companies tell us is that they are very good workers. They're very happy to have them there. And frankly, that's helped the economy. Now, are there problems connected? Well, sure. When you go from a population of 58,000 and add 15,000 people onto that, you're going to have some challenges and some problems. And we're addressing those. We're working on those every single day. Primary care is essential. The other thing we're working a lot on is driving. We have Haitians who, frankly, many times have not driven before. We need to get more driver's training, and we're working on that. So these are things that we are working on. Springfield is moving forward. I've always felt that, and as the governor of the state of Ohio, we want people who want to come here who are legal where they come from.
Okay, so there it is. He's still he's saying that not that there aren't issues, but even a supporter of Trump and Vance can't get behind their claims about the pet eating. And will that stop them from talking about it? Somehow I doubt it.
Right.
All right. We can move on, I think, from let's talk about pets to let's go to Fox News because there's still, of course, a mass murder campaign going on by Israel in Gaza. and that is still fueling regional conflict. Over the weekend, Yemen targeted Israel because Yemen, the poorest country, one of the poorest countries in the world, certainly in that region, has been in solidarity with Palestinians and has tried to, do what it can to stop the genocide, to no avail. So this is Fox News reporting on that.
This is a Fox News alert. Iran-backed militants in Lebanon and Yemen targeting Israel overnight with rocket fire, coming just days after news that Iran could have the makings of a nuclear weapon within weeks. Mike Tobin has more from Tel Aviv, Israel. He's there live. Hey, Mike.
And Shannon, almost a year into this war, and the rocket fire continues. A little bit of rocket fire out of Gaza, a lot of rocket fire out of Lebanon. And this morning, a rocket fired from Yemen landed in Israel. A Gaza ceasefire would stop all of the rocket fire, but Israeli leaders insist that a ceasefire deal is not close. At the weekly demonstration for the hostages, family members claim the Netanyahu government is sabotaging ceasefire deals and leaving the hostages to die.
Yeah, and in fact, we just got an admission from Israel, like months after the fact, that an Israeli airstrike back in November likely killed 3 Israeli captives. So
Right.
what? It's September now. So yes, 10 months later, Israel
Right.
admits, oh yeah, by the way, we killed our own 10 months ago.
Yeah, that's like straight from the, there's the RPB, the Russian playbook. There's also the IPB, the Israeli playbook, which is when they admit to things months after, and after Israel defenders call people conspiracy theorists, and then it turns out it's true. But when it's no longer in the headlines.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Okay, back to Fox News.
Government first bring the hostages home. Escalating the fighting in the north without securing a hostage release deal is a death sentence.
At the southern end of the Gaza Strip, Israel insists the Hamas fighting force has been decimated. Adding to the tension, Hamas benefactor Iran promises a violent retaliation for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian soil. This, as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says, Iran is now weeks away from producing a nuclear bomb if it chooses that path. Meantime, Iran has supplied close-range rockets to Russia to support the invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. says that will enable Russia to use its existing arsenal for targets deeper inside Ukraine.
This development and the growing cooperation between Russia and Iran threatens European security and demonstrates how Iran's destabilizing influence reaches far beyond the Middle East.
This is an interesting claim. I haven't looked too much into this yet, but Iran has denied it. And I don't know if it's true or not. If it's not true, then why is Blinken putting this out there? I think it's Blinken trying to justify what he wants, which is letting Ukraine launch long-range strikes into Russia. And so, he can point to say, well, Iran's giving Russia this capability, which, by the way, I don't think Russia needs Iran for the capability to strike deep into Ukraine. They've been doing that pretty effectively on their own. But I think Blinken, being the warmonger he is, he's supposed to be a diplomat, but that's not what he does. He just goes around and fuels war. Is trying
He's a
to
very
use
creative diplomat. We should give him credit for really thinking outside the box when it comes to diplomacy and not doing it.
Very much so. So I think that's what he's up to here, because reportedly inside the White House, whenever there's like a debate inside the White House about like whether there should be a new escalatory step in Ukraine or whether Ukraine should negotiate, 100% without fail, Blinken is always the one pushing for more escalation, more war. Like remember like 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago next month, General Mark Milley, like the top U.S. military officer in the country at the time, the chair of the Joint Chiefs, he said we should encourage peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine should consolidate its gains and end the war.
Right.
That was so the top military official was saying we should have diplomacy. The top diplomat, Blinken, was saying no, we should have war. So that's Antony Blinken.
When you're less hawkish than a military, maybe you're doing it wrong. When you're a diplomat and you're less hawkish than the military, maybe you're doing it wrong.
Yes, but can Mark Milley play the blues like Tony Blinken can?
Good question.
So. Yeah. Okay. Well, we covered a lot Trump's lie about migrants eating pets. So let's turn to one of the most egregious lies that Kamala Harris told. One of them, of course, was when she claimed in the debate that Hamas committed sexual violence on October 7th, when again, there is no evidence for that. And of course, that's a claim that's been used to justify Israeli atrocities in Gaza.
Right. And she actually said, sorry, keep going. Sorry,
No.
I cut you off. And she actually said she didn't just say sexual abuse. She said people were horribly raped. And not only, as we pointed out, is that a lie, but it's like adding insult to injury is the fact that we know there's been rapes of Palestinians and that gets ignored. So the fake rape claim gets repeated and the actual rape, documented rape, gets ignored. Just so offensive.
So that was one of her lies. But another one was when she claimed during the debate that there are no active duty U.S. troops in combat zones around the world. And the U.S. forces that are in Syria and Iraq, I think, would beg to differ. And she was asked about so a Trump Waltz surrogate, Maura Healey, was asked about that.
Ask you about her comments about the military. She said during the debate this about the U.S. military. Let's listen.
As of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century.
Our fact checkers found that to be false, and I have a lot of experience in that area as well. There are currently 900 U.S. military personnel in Syria, 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq. All have been under regular threat from drones and missiles for months. We also have action in the Red Sea. We also, every single day, the Navy SEALs, Delta Forces, special operators can be part of any sort of deadly raid. So why would she make that claim?
Well, I think what's important here, Martha, is that Kamala Harris, in contrast to Donald Trump, demonstrated herself to be commander-in-chief. We are in a world where there are all sorts of conflicts, and it's all the more reason we need somebody who's serious and who supports the military. And just remember,
but Governor, excuse me, but she said there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone. That is not true. You say she demonstrated her ability to be commander-in-chief, but did she not know about these people in Syria and Iraq? Why would she say that?
Look, that was a comment. That was a comment in a debate. I think the point that she was trying to make was a broader point. And of course we have military.
It was a comment in a debate.
Yeah, this is what Kamala, remember when Kamala was asked about like calling Joe Biden a segregationist by Stephen Colbert, and she was like, it was a debate. It was a debate. That's like their go-to line. Oh, it was said during a debate. So of course it's not true.
Yeah. It was a comment in a debate. And we all know in debates you can lie through your teeth. It's fine. What's the problem? Right. It's like the one chance many people will have to evaluate who they're going to vote for, because like not everyone pays attention to these things. And so it was a comment and debate. Big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal.
This is I mean, you'd think that the governor of Massachusetts, who's a surrogate for Kamala and Waltz would have a better talking point at her disposal. Like, I'm surprised they didn't go over that this weekend. Yeah. You know, one of the things is that when Trump's outrageous lies, he actually is doing his opponents a favor, because these are so much less kind of attention getting and over the top than his lies. They're less outrageous. So they kind of fall by the wayside.
Right. Yeah. It's like to lie about like whether U.S. troops are in combat zones is a lot less kind of colorful.
Yeah, exactly.
Than saying that migrants are eating pets.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, we talked earlier about how we are like your one-stop shop for pop culture. And so to wrap the show, we're going to cover, I mean, the hottest film in the land right now. I'm sure everyone has seen, the audience has seen it, of course, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
It's a biopic of Ronald Reagan.
With Dennis Quaid. And here is Dennis Quaid talking about playing Ronald Reagan.
I just remember a bolt of fear going up my spine when I was offered the role, because everybody in the world, they're going to know who he is and probably have an opinion about him as well. He was also my favorite president. So when I was...
That's so embarrassing. All right. Reagan was your favorite president? Okay. That makes me not want to watch how you portray him. But I was
offered the role. I didn't say yes and I didn't say no. I took some time to think about it, and I went up to the Reagan Ranch, and I could really feel him there. And that's when I knew I had a way into portraying his humanity or just
Remember, we talked about this before, that there's like a weird spiritual experience going on where like there's a Reagan Ouija board where people are channeling Reagan in a way that reminded us of the film Ghost. And here he's just the latest person to do that. He felt him. He had an interesting experience. Yeah.
him as a person behind the public persona.
Reagan paints an intimate portrait of the president's story from his early days in Hollywood at the height of the Red Scare.
There's about to be another war right here.
Which means he was snitching on fellow people in Hollywood who he thought were communists. That's what they mean by his.
He started out as a leftist, by the way.
Yeah, he was a Democrat.
Like Frank Sinatra. Yeah.
He was a Democrat, but then he turned into a classic snitch.
Right, one of the worst.
In the Red Scare, and
yeah.
I mean, horrible legacy in Central America, especially where he fueled dirty wars that killed hundreds of thousands of people by arming death squads. But again, I don't think I haven't seen the film, spoiler alert, but I don't think that aspect of him is portrayed accurately.
Yeah. All right.
Hollywood. The commies on one side, the mob on the other. And you're right in the middle.
To the historic moments that shaped his presidency, including the 1981 attempt on his life, the end of the Cold War, and opening of a new chapter in American foreign policy. What would you say you think his legacy is?
He left several. At the time of the 1980 election, we all.
To be fair, he has left several legacies. Hollowing out the middle class.
Breaking strikes,
right. Getting rid of any media accountability, homelessness crisis, AIDS. We can give him credit for that. So,
I'd love to see how they cover that.
Yeah.
in this film, because he basically denied that it was a problem.
Right.
And a lot of people basically say he has blood on his hands because of it. He basically refused to acknowledge that AIDS was a crisis and ignored the reality that people were dying and suffering. Right. I will say this: the one good thing he did was he did get really alarmed about nuclear Armageddon, and he did reach some really important arms control treaties with the Soviet Union. And amazingly, we've gone so far to the right that when Trump pulled out of the INF treaty, which Reagan had negotiated, no one cared.
Right.
No one cared. Everybody applauded. Everyone claiming to uphold Reagan's legacy. Nobody raised an issue. And Democrats looked the other way because that was when they were all fixated on their belief that Trump was really a Russian asset. So him tearing up this really important nuclear treaty with Russia was like, who cares?
Right.
Like, let's focus on Robert Mueller. So that's part of the legacy of Reagan too, is like, since then we've gotten even more hawkish in some ways than even he was. And he was, of course, a huge hawk.
Another thing that Reagan did that is way to the left of Biden is he called up President Begin of Israel and told him to stop the war on Lebanon, and actually referred to it as a Holocaust. And guess what happened then? It stopped. Yeah.
Imagine that.
Let's I just want to play a little bit more of this so people get more of a sense of this great film. And by the way, of course, Quaid is a Trump supporter. So obviously doesn't care about the way Trump has shifted things on the nuclear front. Okay, let's see.
We were a nation in decline, and he came along and said, no, we're not. We're going this way. And we all followed him.
That's interesting. He just pointed to the left. Okay.
And his legacy would be that he won the Cold War. It was Reagan who really followed a strategy and principles to end the Cold War.
The film is told from a decidedly unfamiliar perspective. An ex-KGB operative played by John Voight.
I was a brand new KGB officer, given my first intelligence assignment. A certain actor and union leader.
It's such a great way to tell this story from the kind of Soviet point of view, and it really points up what I think the main thrust of his presidency was about. It took a Cold Warrior to be able to negotiate with the Soviets.
But what will be familiar to audiences is the Gipper's one-of-a-kind sense of humor.
I will not, for political purposes, exploit my opponent's youth and inexperience.
And of course, those seminal moments that altered the course of history.
General Secretary
Okay, get ready. We're about to see an interesting crosscut.
Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Do you get sort of
That's a terrible impersonation.
He sounded like Richard Nixon there.
Exactly. He sounded like a Richard Nixon on steroids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think I'll be seeing this film.
No.
It's hard to get to the movies anyway, but yeah, I don't think this is going to get me sitting in the
Aaron
seats.
doesn't do a lot of pop culture when it comes to cinema, but this certainly is not going to get you
I
out
don't
of
think
your
it's going
seat.
to do it. Yeah. By the way, you could argue he actually prolonged the Cold War way longer than it could have, it needed to go on for. Soviet Union was already in decline, and there's some historians who say actually that if not for Reagan, it would have ended earlier. Certainly a lot of money was wasted by both empires on the military. Had Reagan not been such a militarist, maybe there could have even been peace earlier, and maybe even bigger and better arms control treaties way earlier, rather than having like all these nuclear weapons built up that now threaten the world.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Monday Morning. Katie, anything you want to promote for this week?
Well, if you've bought tickets already to the show that I'm doing with Abby Martin and Rania Kalik, you're in luck because it's sold out. That's at the People's Forum. We're going to, as usual, have a great show tomorrow at the Katie Halper Show, youtube.com/the Katie Halper Show. And also, thank you so much to everyone who gave super chats, and especially Wade Worth, who was very generous with their donation. That's about it. And we're going to have a great show for you this week on Useful Idiots, too.
You're darn right we will, because that's what we do, is deliver great shows week after week. And we thank you for tuning in and for your support. Our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show, get bonus content. Thanks for watching Monday Morning. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.